I'm 41, and in a town this size that means people have decided what kind of man I am whether I help them or not. I teach shop at the high school. Woodworking, basic wiring, safe tool use, small engine stuff when the budget lets me. I keep teenagers busy with their hands and try to send them out of my room knowing how to measure twice and not act stupid around a table saw. Parents trust me because I show up on time, keep things locked, and don't make a big production out of anything. My house is the same way. Old place, 2 bedrooms, decent porch, detached garage, nothing fancy. Clean counters. Straight lines. Tools where they belong. Quiet when I want it quiet. Maya taught across the hall from me. English, student publications, community projects, half the events the school somehow expected to happen without paying anybody enough to care. She was 36, sharp as a tack, dressed better than anybody else in the building, and somehow able to talk to a failing sophomore, an angry parent, and the principal in the same 10-minute stretch without losing her smile. Kids loved her because she never talked down to them. Teachers leaned on her because she could fix almost anything that involved words, people, or panic. We were close long before anything changed. She knew I took my coffee black and too hot. I knew she kept honey packets in her desk because the faculty room tea tasted like boiled cardboard. She'd text me when the copier jammed because somehow I was the man people called for both band saws and office machines. I'd cover her last 10 minutes if a student melted down in the hallway. We rode together to weekend school events sometimes because it saved parking and because neither of us felt like pretending we weren't friends. That Thursday night I was leaving school later than usual. Spring showcase was 2 weeks out, and the student display frames I'd promised were still spread across the shop tables in pieces. Maya had stayed late too, writing parent messages and cleaning up draft posters with 3 girls from student council. We walked out together around 8:30. She headed to her apartment. I headed home. 20 minutes later she called. Not dramatic. That was the first thing that made my stomach go hard. Maya was not a dramatic person. But her voice had gone flat in a way I had never heard before. Can you come here? I was already grabbing my keys again. What happened? A pause. Then, he changed the locks. Her landlord's place sat over an old storefront on Maple. Cheap rent, thin walls, bad windows, the sort of property a man held together just enough to keep collecting checks. He'd been pushing her for weeks with fake repair notices and vague comments about restructuring units. She told me he wanted the place back fast. Said he kept acting like her lease meant whatever he wanted it to mean that day. I told her to document everything. She said she was trying. I didn't know he'd go this far that fast. When I pulled up, her things were on the sidewalk. Not all of them. Just enough to make the point. 2 boxes of books. A lamp. A laundry basket. 1 suitcase with the zipper half split open. Her green reading chair from the corner by the window. A trash bag tied off with clothes in it like somebody had cleaned out a shed instead of a person's home. Maya was standing beside it with her arms folded tight. She looked straight ahead when I got out of the truck. The landlord was in the doorway. Mid-50s, pink face, soft middle, the kind of man who mistook being annoying for being important. You can't be in there tonight, he said before I even reached the steps. Units under emergency maintenance. I looked past him. The apartment behind him was dark and perfectly still. Then why are her things outside? She was informed. Maya let out one short laugh with no humor in it. He taped a notice up this morning after I'd already left for school. He shrugged. Timing's timing. I wanted very badly to put him through his own railing. Instead I walked over to the boxes, picked one up, and set it by my truck. He started talking louder, like volume made him official. You can't remove property under dispute. I turned and looked at him long enough that he finally shut his mouth. Maya, I said, get what matters first. That seemed to steady her. She nodded once and wiped hair out of her face. We worked without making a scene out of it. Laptop bag. School papers. Medication. Clothes for tomorrow. Her lesson planner. 2 framed photos. A hard drive. More books than either of us should have bothered with at that hour, but I knew better than to tell an English teacher to leave books behind. At one point she tried her key again out of pure anger. It didn't fit the new lock. She stood there staring at it, jaw set so tight I could see the muscle jump. I came up beside her. Don't give him tonight. She swallowed and nodded. By the time the truck bed was full and the back seat was stacked to the windows, it was past 10. She stood on the curb with her purse hanging from one shoulder and looked so tired it hit me somewhere low and ugly. Not weak. Not broken. Just tired in the way a person gets when they've used up every clean response and the world keeps asking for one more. I can get a motel, she said. No. She looked at me. I'm serious. So am I. That becomes a bigger thing by morning. It already is. I opened the passenger door. You're staying at my place. We'll sort the rest tomorrow. She didn't move right away. Pride was all over her face. So was common sense. For a night, she said. I gave her the look I use on freshmen when they lie to me about sanding with the grain. Get in the truck. The drive to my house was quiet. Not tense. Just full. When we got there, the porch light was on, the kitchen was clean, and for the first time in years I saw my own front door and knew that by midnight it was not going to be only mine. I carried in the boxes. She carried in the lighter stuff and kept apologizing every third trip until I finally told her to stop. I put her things in the spare room, then in the hall when the spare room filled, then on the dining table when the hall filled too. She stood in the middle of my living room with her overnight bag in one hand, looking at the stacks of her life in my neat house like she'd crossed into somebody else's picture by mistake. I'm sorry, she said quietly. I took the bag from her and set it by the spare room door. You're safe here. That made her eyes lift to mine. The house was too quiet after that. Her boxes in my hallway. Her coat on the back of my chair. Her shampoo already sitting on my bathroom counter because there was nowhere else to put it. Nothing dramatic had happened inside those walls yet, but everything had changed anyway. She asked where to sleep. I told her the spare room. Then we both stood there 1 second too long, surrounded by cardboard, books, and the awkward truth that by morning we were going to wake up under the same roof and go teach like this was normal. By the third morning, Maya's coffee mug was already in my dish rack like it had always belonged there. That was the first thing that got me. Not the boxes in the spare room. Not the extra shoes by the door. Not even the fact that I had started checking whether she needed the bathroom before I shaved. It was that mug. White ceramic, little blue line around the rim, one tiny chip near the handle. I reached for it without thinking when I made coffee, filled mine, filled hers, and only caught myself when she walked into the kitchen in one of my old school t-shirts and gave me that tired half smile. You remembered. I set the mug down in front of her. You take too long to become human without it. She laughed, low and rough from sleep, and leaned against the counter while the sun came in across the sink. My kitchen had never had that kind of sound in it before. Usually it was me, the radio, and a clock ticking too loud. Now there was her hair pinned up wrong, papers spread near the fruit bowl, and the smell of coffee mixing with the onions she'd cooked the night before. That was the other change. My house smelled like food now. Real food. Garlic, pepper, something simmering instead of toast or whatever I could heat fast between grating and sleep. The first week settled into a rhythm before either of us admitted it had. She took the spare room, but half her life kept drifting outward. A stack of novels landed on the side table in my living room. Her school tote stayed by the front door. She claimed one shelf in the fridge and then, somehow, two. On Thursday she came home with groceries, looked in my pantry, and said, "Mike, were you planning to live on crackers, eggs, and stubbornness for the rest of the year?" I was at the kitchen table sorting invoices and permit receipts I dug out of an old file box in the hall closet. "There's pasta. There is one box of plain spaghetti and a can of beans. It's food. It's evidence." Then she tied her hair back, pushed past me, and started cooking like she had every right to. I should have hated that. My house ran on habit, and habit did not usually wear hoop earrings and take over the stove. But I sat there listening to her move around my kitchen, opening cabinets, muttering at my lack of seasoning, and something in me unclenched that I hadn't known was locked. At school we acted normal. Or tried to. I taught first period shop, corrected bad cuts, reminded 3 boys that clamps were not optional, and spent lunch repairing one of the rolling display frames for the spring showcase. Maya was coordinating the whole front half of that event with student council. Readings, art walls, family check-in, sponsor signs, the little stage in the gym for music and speeches. I was building the display booths, portable shelving, and a backdrop the drama kids had begged for after the old one cracked last year. We'd always worked well together, but now there was a strange current under everything. She'd pass my classroom door and tap the frame twice to get my attention. I'd catch her in the hall and hand her the granola bar she forgot in my truck. During faculty meetings she slid into the chair beside mine like she always did, but this time I noticed how many people noticed. Not badly. Just the way people do in a town where everybody tracks small changes because it gives them something to do. Coach Dempsey glanced at us over his notebook. The art teacher smiled into her coffee like she was filing information away for later. Even a few students picked up on it. One of the junior girls helping with showcase setup looked between us after school and said, "You two are weirdly in sync lately." Maya didn't miss a beat. "That's because Mr. Harper follows instructions when they're written clearly." I said, "That's because Ms. Bennett makes color-coded lists like a mob boss." The girl laughed and moved on, but Maya looked at me over a stack of poster board and grinned in a way that stayed with me the rest of the afternoon. At home we kept building our own systems. I fixed the spare room window that had always stuck in damp weather. The next day I came home and found she'd reorganized the junk drawer, my mail sorter, and the mess of warranty papers I'd been stuffing into a basket for 5 years. I should have objected. Instead I stood there holding my lunch container while she looked up from the dining table and said, "Your filing method was an insult to paper." 2 nights later I brought lumber in from the garage and built her a proper desk for the spare room because the little folding table I'd set up for her was garbage. She stood in the doorway while I sanded the edges and said softly, "You really don't know how to do anything halfway, do you?" I kept my eyes on the drill. "No." She was quiet for a second. "Good." The landlord started circling by the end of that week. First it was a note in her mailbox forwarded through the school office, all stiff wording and fake urgency about abandoned property. Then a complaint tag on my front gate about outdoor storage, which was laughable because the only things in my yard were a mower, 2 flower pots, and a bench I'd repaired last summer. After that came a call from somebody at town code enforcement asking polite questions about my detached garage and whether I was operating a business out of it. I wrote down names, dates, times. Maya read every line before I filed it away. "He's trying to make you regret helping me," she said one night, sitting cross-legged on my couch with her laptop open and legal tabs pulled up across the screen. I was at the dining table with permit folders spread around me. Too late. She looked over at me then. Really looked. Not playful. Not easy. "You shouldn't have to take this on." I capped my pen and met her eyes. "You're here." "So I do." For a second neither of us moved. The whole house felt still around that sentence. Then the dryer buzzed in the hall, and she stood up too fast, like she needed the excuse. I almost let her go. Instead I reached out and caught 2 of her fingers. She stopped. It wasn't much. Barely anything. But I felt the pause go through both of us. Maya. She turned back. Close enough now that I could see the tiredness under her eyes and the way she was trying not to show how much that one small touch had done. Yeah, she said. I should have said something careful. Practical. Something I could control later. What came out was, you don't have to keep standing like you're ready to leave. Her face changed. Softened, then tightened again in a whole different way. Mike, she said quietly, that's not a small thing to say. I know. Neither of us kissed. Neither of us stepped back either. We just stood there in my living room with her notes on the couch, my permit records on the table, and the spring showcase hanging over us like a clock. The house was still mine on paper. The arrangement was still temporary if anyone asked. But the truth had already started moving, and both of us knew it. By the time the town made the inspection official, Maya had taken over one end of my dining table and I had taken over the other, and neither of us pretended anymore that this was still just a rough week with boxes. She had legal pads, printouts, highlighted lease language, and a laptop full of emails. I had permit folders, tax records, photographs of my garage, receipts for electrical work, and a binder I built out of clear sleeves and labeled tabs because if some petty man wanted to make my house into a problem, I was going to hand the town a cleaner file than they'd ever seen in their lives. The landlord stopped trying to look casual about it. First came another complaint about my detached garage. Then one about unsafe occupancy. Then one about unregistered workshop use, which was nonsense. I taught at school. I built shelves for neighbors sometimes and fixed the occasional broken chair for teachers who asked nice, but I wasn't running a business out of my house. He knew that. Truth wasn't the point. Friction was. He wanted pressure. So I gave him structure. I installed motion lights on both corners of the house. Put a camera over the front porch and another facing the driveway. Replaced the back gate latch. Printed every complaint notice and logged the date it arrived. Maya found the original property records on her old place, tracked down the actual owner behind the local management shell, and drafted 3 emails so sharp and clean they made my own look like I'd written them with a hammer. One night she was at the table in my sweatshirt, reading through county code on her laptop while I mounted the last camera in the yard. When I came back in, she didn't even look up. He lied about emergency repairs, she said. I set the drill on the counter. I know. No, I mean I can prove it. She turned the screen toward me. He filed no emergency maintenance notice, no contractor permit, nothing. And the lock change happened before the written demand. He jumped the order. I stepped closer. Can that help? She leaned back in the chair and looked up at me with that focused, dangerous calm she got when somebody made the mistake of thinking she was easy to corner. It can bury him. I smiled before I meant to. There you are. Her mouth twitched. I've been here. I know. That look held a second too long. It had been happening more. Little pauses. Her shoulder brushing mine in the kitchen and neither of us moving away fast enough to call it accidental. Her passing me a file and our hands staying together one beat past normal. Me waking up at 5 and listening for her in the next room before I even got out of bed. At school, pressure came from every direction at once. The spring showcase was 3 days away, and half the student display panels warped after a pipe leak in storage. I stayed late 2 nights rebuilding them in the shop while Maya calmed nervous parents, rewrote the event map, and found a backup sound system when the original one got pulled for a church function across town. We were running on coffee, stubbornness, and whatever we grabbed out of the fridge standing up. Students noticed. Are y'all sleeping here? One senior asked when he found us in the library before first bell, both grading papers at the same table. Maya didn't miss a beat. That depends. Are you turning your essay in today? He laughed and backed off, but after he left she rubbed her forehead and said, I look that bad? I slid my coffee toward her. You look tired. So do you. Yeah. She took a drink from my cup without asking. That shouldn't have hit me as hard as it did. But it did. The worst of it came the night before the inspection. We got home after 9, both dead on our feet, and found a fresh orange notice clipped to my front door. Formal review. Complaint escalation. Required access to garage and property perimeter by 10 the next morning. Maya read it once, then again slower. I took it from her and felt my jaw lock. He timed it for the showcase. Of course he did. I went inside, set my keys down too hard, and started pulling the binder from the table. She followed me in, quiet at first, then quieter in the way that meant she was deciding something. I should go, she said. I looked up. No. Mike. No. This is hitting your house now. Your name. Your job if people start talking the wrong way. I closed the binder. They can talk. I'm serious. Her voice sharpened. I can stay with Dana for a few days. Or get a short-term rental. He wants leverage, and right now I'm the lever. I stood up so fast the chair legs scraped. You think that fixes it? It takes me out of his line of sight. It puts you right back in the habit of scrambling every time some man decides to push you around. Her face changed at that. Hurt first. Then anger. That is not what I said. It's what he wants. And I'm trying to keep this from costing you more. By then we were standing in the middle of the kitchen, both exhausted, both too wound up to soften the edges. I took one breath and forced my voice back down. Listen to me. You leaving now doesn't protect me. It just tells him pressure works. She stared at me. Why are you doing this? I had 100 safe answers. Because it's wrong. Because you're my friend. Because he picked the wrong house. None of them were enough anymore. So I told her the truth. Because this stopped being temporary for me a while ago. I wasn't letting her go. Ever had to fight for someone when things got difficult? Let's talk in the comments. The room went dead still. Her eyes searched my face like she was checking whether I understood what I'd just admitted. I did. Fully. Maybe later than I should have, but I did. Maya, I said, quieter now, I'm not letting you leave just because things got expensive. You're here. With me. We finish this that way. She let out one shaky breath. Then another. You really mean that? Yes. She stepped closer. So close I could feel the heat of her after the cold porch air. We have an inspection in the morning, she said, like she still needed one practical sentence between us and whatever came next. I know. The showcase is tomorrow night. I know. She put one hand flat against my chest. Okay. Then she kissed me. It wasn't wild. It wasn't rushed. It was the kind of kiss that happens after days of carrying the same weight and finally admitting you've both had a hand on it the whole time. Her mouth was warm, tired, certain. I held her face, then her waist, and when we broke apart she stayed there against me like there was nowhere else she was supposed to be. We didn't solve anything in that moment. The notices were still on the counter. The landlord was still coming. Morning was still going to arrive too fast. But when I locked the doors that night, checked the cameras, and set our inspection binder by the front hall, I wasn't preparing for a fight on my own anymore. The inspector showed up at 9:53 with a clipboard, a county badge, and the expression of a man who had already decided he was not interested in anybody's local nonsense before lunch. That helped. The landlord was there too, leaning against his truck in a pressed button-down like he thought this was going to turn into a little public lesson about who got to stay comfortable in town and who did not. When he saw Maya step out onto the porch beside me, his mouth tightened. Not surprise. More like irritation that the pressure had failed to separate us. I had the garage open, the permit binder on the workbench, electrical records clipped in order, and every complaint notice dated and tabbed. Maya had her own folder under one arm, neat as a blade. The inspector introduced himself, asked a few standard questions, then started walking the property. I answered what was mine. Detached garage, personal workshop, permitted wiring upgrade 3 years earlier, no commercial operation, no occupancy issue, no structural change. He checked the panel, the exits, the smoke alarms, the spacing, the storage. He found a clean floor, labeled cabinets, safe cords, and less drama than he had probably been promised. Then Maya stepped in when it mattered. The complaint had not only been about my garage. It had folded in language about improper housing circumstances, which was the landlord's way of trying to turn her temporary stay into leverage. The inspector asked a careful question about that, and Maya handed him the lease timeline, the notice photo, the email trail, and a written summary so organized I watched the man's eyebrows lift halfway through the first page. "You were locked out before proper process concluded," he said. "Yes," Maya said calmly. "The landlord cut in right away. That tenancy was unstable from the start. She didn't even raise her voice. You changed the locks before the deadline in your own written notice, and without an approved emergency filing. That record is in the packet." The inspector looked at him. "Do you have documentation for emergency work?" The landlord started talking in circles. Urgency. Damage concerns. Verbal warnings. Administrative timing. Maya let him run until he had nothing left that sounded solid. Then she handed over the county search showing no emergency filing, no contractor pull, and the ownership record proving he was a manager, not the actual owner. That one landed. The inspector's tone changed. Not bigger. Colder. By 10:30 the whole thing had turned inside out on him. My property passed. The occupancy angle went nowhere. The workshop complaint died on paper. And the attention shifted where it belonged: illegal lock change, harassment pattern, bad faith reporting, misuse of local process. The best part was that none of it got loud. That was what he had counted on. Noise. Confusion. Somebody emotional enough to look unreliable. Instead he got me answering in plain facts and Maya laying out dates like railroad ties. When the inspector finally closed his folder, he said, "I'm marking the property complaint unsupported. The tenancy matter appears to require separate review, and I suggest you stop using county complaint channels to pressure a private dispute." The landlord's face went pale around the ears. He tried one last little push. "This isn't over." Maya looked at him with the kind of steady expression that had probably ruined a lot of bad arguments in parent meetings over the years. "For you, maybe not." He left without another word. I stood there in the driveway after his truck pulled off, the morning suddenly too bright, my shoulders finally remembering how long they'd been locked. Maya let out a breath beside me and pressed the heel of her hand against her forehead. "That was deeply satisfying," she said. I laughed. First real laugh in days. A little. We should frame his face from that last minute. We have the porch camera. That got a grin out of her, and then there was no time left to stand there because the spring showcase opened at 6 and half the gym still needed to be turned into something a family could walk into proudly. So we went to school and did what we always did. I rebuilt a warped display brace during lunch. Maya redirected 2 volunteers, saved the program order when the principal wanted last-minute remarks, and somehow calmed a mother upset about seating without spilling a drop of coffee. By evening the gym was full. Student art on clean panels. Shop projects under good light. Poetry readings in one corner. Music near the stage. Parents wandering slowly, smiling in that surprised way adults do when kids make something real right in front of them. More than one person told us the event had never looked better. They were right. It had weight to it. Structure. Warmth. The kind of thing that only comes together when 2 people stop guarding credit and just build the whole thing side by side. Late that night, after cleanup, after the last family left, after the final folding chair got stacked, we went back to my house with leftover cookies in a paper tray in silence that felt earned instead of strained. On the kitchen counter was a message from the actual property owner Maya had contacted. New management. Formal review. Her old unit would be available again once the mess cleared, or she could take another rental they owned across town at a reduced rate for the trouble. She read it once and set the phone down. "Well," she said. I nodded, though something in my chest had already gone tight. "That's good." She looked at me for a long second. "Is it?" I didn't answer fast enough. She stepped closer, tired and beautiful and completely sure of herself. "I'm not going back there." "You don't have to decide tonight." "I already did." She reached into her tote, pulled out a folded paper, and put it on the counter between us. I stopped by the office supply store after lunch. I opened it. A basic lease form. Blank except for the address at the top. My address. I looked up at her. "If I stay," she said, "I don't want to stay like an emergency. I don't want to be a guest you protect until life gets neat again. I want in for real. Shared bills. Shared responsibility. Both names.